So much to talk to you about it. I guess I'm just looking forward to learning some more about, my experience reading your book. And, I'm a product of the Puritan work ethic in New England. So the idea that you could even lessen the critic, never mind have a pre-critic and post-critic life the way you describe it, is very intriguing to me. Uh, and Maybe start now with what your life is like having had these insights, how they kind of came into your life, and now you've written a book about it. That's a pretty serious way to claim the insights and to internalize them. Uh, and what it's like living this way now, today, this week, as you've got the book coming out, and does the critic ever sneak back in
Oh,
through a side door? And what's it like now? And how did you get here? I guess maybe that's a way to think of our trajectory here.
hmm Um, and what it's like, which was your first question, is it's absolutely delightful. And I mean, I'm way happier, way more joyful, way more present in the moment. And I go about my day, instead of asking, what should I do, which is pretty much how I navigated most of my first, 25, 30 years on the planet. I began asking, what do I want to do? What feels good to me here? Where is my intuition taking me? And when you begin asking those questions, I believe you unlock powerful doorways into your own spirit, into the larger spirit, and you begin living a very fulfilling life. And you wake up each day again not looking at the day and saying, well, here's all the requirements placed upon me. You begin to say, what am I choosing to put in this day, and how am I going to characterize each thing I allow into my day? Um, and I begin to reframe everything in terms of a want, even if it is a requirement of my employer, for instance. So to me, it's living a very powerful life. It's living, and I see it as like your energy is centered on the inside versus kind of scattered all over the place, is where I used to be, and now I'm centered. And I would say, if I had to describe it in a nutshell, I would say it's a life of confidence, clarity, and compassion.
The three C's:
Hmm.
confidence, clarity, and compassion. Well, you mentioned something that I think goes to my own questions, having had a corporate life myself and now, being retired. But what does it look like if you have something that your job is expecting of you, or your
Hmm.
boss or whoever,
Yep.
and how do you reframe that as a want?
Yeah. So, at the most basic level, I might start with this. I want to get paid. I like getting paid. I want the money. This is a requirement of this job, so I'm showing up. But right there, just saying the words I want puts you back in your power, back in your center, reconnects you with your intuition, with your spirit, and now, like you're ready to go. I mean, that's just a really powerful way to walk into something, even something that, frankly, Lynn, at times bores me to tears, in the middle of the meeting. But still going in and perseverating on, oh, I can't believe I have to do this. I mean, that the words have to, must, should are power depleters. And when I say power, I mean your spirit, your soul. I mean, they're depleting it. And so really moving into that want. And then I look for other things. Like I might say, well, I do want to attend this meeting because I want to stay in the know on this project. I want to know what's going on with this project. I mean, I look for those wants and then I anchor to those wants.
And the wants, like I'm picturing a meeting too, where uh, if you have a want to learn something about a project, it seems like it's a way of tuning your focus or your attention so
That's
that you actually hear things that if you hadn't made it connected to your wants, you might have just missed.
I agree completely. I also believe, I'm a big person of faith. I believe our thoughts are all prayers. And when you let your thoughts spin around on negative things you don't want, that's essentially the prayer you're sending off. And when you can intentionally reorient yourself to the want. Like, what is it I want to get out of this? What is it I want to contribute here? And when you get your mind focused on that, you're praying in a completely different way. You're praying positively, not negatively.
Now, I think there's mentions of meditation. Are you a meditator? Is
I am.
meditation part of your practice?
I
Uh,
I am.
what
It took me a
sort?
lot of years.
Uh-huh.
I am, I would say, a very free-form meditator, which means I'm not rigid about it because I did rigid meditating and it drove me away from meditating. Like I always felt like a failure at meditating, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a lot of years, I would come to meditation with this idea that said, I'm a failure at meditating. And now I often sit for only 15 or 20 minutes and just say, I'm going to just quiet my mind and I try to focus on me and my breathing. And so I see it as an exercise of I'm up in my head a lot. And it's me moving my awareness down onto me as best I can. And invariably, my mind wanders and I let it wander. And then I see, like when I move my attention back onto my core, I see that as a coming home and I celebrate it like, oh, I get to come home again. Let me just bring it back to center. So I'm not going to say I'm a terrific meditator, but I'm someone who has found the value in just 15 minutes a day of quieting my mind. I do it frequently at work, actually. It really helps me in the day just to close my door and meditate for 15 minutes.
Do you ever meditate during a boring meeting?
Yes. I think I love that you say that. I actually find that to be quite powerful to just start like focusing on your breathing. Like I see it as I write about it in the book, like running an elevator up and down inside my core, and like bringing myself down into my core. I do that a lot.
Hmm. My experience of meditating, well, it's perplexing. I don't even know where to start. But I guess where I'm wanting to hear more about is uh, the thoughts just keep arising. It just seems like I have an infinite supply of
Yes.
bubbling up or whatever image. And as I'm following the breath and doing a similar practice to yours, they can kind of quiet. Uh, I guess what I've wondered is if I could have a recording of my thoughts 20 years ago when I first started, at the Zen Center of Denver. I do a lot of serious
Yeah.
meditating. And those thoughts that arose when I was 20 years younger and the thoughts that are rising now, I guess I've maybe surmised or guessed that they would be very similar, that the quality of that endless flow of thinking, it
Hmm.
appears to be kind of built in or wired. But when I read your book, I get the idea that, well, I wonder maybe if you do these exercises, the kinds of things you're doing, and just the practice that we're both doing,
Hmm.
the actual the river changes. It
Yep.
was sort of had a red tint to it 20 years ago, and today it's more blue, it's more positive, it's more light. But
Yes. Yeah.
what's your sense of how this kind of work can it actually change thoughts over time?
You can change thoughts over time. And I would say, I do believe just in the pure goodness of life. And so if something is recurring in my life, like a recurring thought, my initial assumption is it's there for a good reason. And for someone who had a critic for a lot of years, I have found that the good reason is that it's a thought that is ripe for me to change and improve to become a better thought. And I will give you an exact example. As I was setting up my computer here and preparing just today for all of this, and you had sent the note about possibly recording on my end, and I noticed tension going on in my body. And so I sat for 1 minute. I believe in a 1 minute meditation. And I sat with it and I said, what's happening? And I said, what am I thinking that's causing this tension? And what came to me was this: I'm afraid that the sound recording is going to fail during the interview. Okay. That was the thought I was having.
Hmm.
And so, Len, I sat down and I wrote, the recording is guaranteed. It's easy, it's set, and it's coming in clearly, perfectly, and showcasing me and Len and my voice and image to great effect. That's what
You
I
wrote
sat.
that down
I wrote it
in
down on a
pen.
post-it.
It's a
I wrote
post-it,
it
yeah.
down.
Uh-huh.
And so I think that thought was getting my attention so that I could change it, so I could surrender it and say, that's not what I want to think and perseverate on. I want to look at something else. And to me, that's the key. Most of us with a critic, we aren't intentionally wanting to be critical or nervous or worrying all the time. We just have a habit of
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
And
It,
habits can be changed.
there. I believe that completely. Habits can be changed, and the radical thing that you've brought to my awareness is that habits of thought can change. I think I might have said I can develop. Recently, I had such a wonderful dental hygienist, I don't know, 2 months ago. And she, like every other hygienist I've had in the past decades, has said, you brush your teeth only once a month, once a month, once a day. How about twice a day? Like add to the morning. And I always go, yeah, yeah. But for some reason, I really like this woman, and I started brushing my teeth in the morning every day, and it's a habit.
Yeah.
And uh, it at some point it catches and it changes the way
Yeah.
my morning goes. And if I don't do it, I think, oh, well, what's missing? Oh, I forgot to brush my teeth.
Yeah.
So it's a little more complex for me to imagine transferring that experience, which I really believe in, the power of habits, uh, to my thinking.
I think it's uh, very easy, actually. And I think that to me, that's a core spiritual thing that I ask for help with. Like, hey, I'm skewing negative on this. Help me with that. And I find that I very easily, with just a little effort by me to say, what's my negative thought and what's a more positive thought that I would want to hold. And I find myself moving to that easily. And I now found I'm in a place, like as I said to you, like it's almost like I have this enhanced sensitivity when I go negative now, and I feel it and I feel the tension, and again, I don't see it as like, oh no, these terrible thoughts are chasing me again. Instead, I say, oh, there must be tremendous opportunity here for
Uh,
me. And
uh-huh.
that's why that's coming forward for me right now. So going back to our discussion about meditation, if I have thoughts that just keep arising in meditation, um, yes, I think it's good to practice detachment from thoughts, but sometimes that recurring thought is coming forward in meditation so that you can give it a little attention and a little love and maybe improve it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, One of the things which I did practice, and it took every ounce of willingness in me to do it, is to stand in the mirror in the bathroom and talk to myself.
Yeah,
I don't know where I learned that people who did that were weird, and I
yeah,
am not that kind of a person.
I know.
So, and affirmations and all that. And I immediately sensed some power in it. I stand up straighter, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm a good looking older guy,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
have this and that, and I'm losing some weight, whatever. But I take it you've done a fair amount of talking to
yeah.
yourself in the mirror, and I'm wondering, how has that practice changed? How do you talk to yourself in the mirror now versus the way you did 5 or 10 or 20 years
Oh,
ago?
I feel like when I started it, just like you, I was so uncomfortable. I mean, sometimes I physically like couldn't do it. I would start to talk and my eyes would wander. Like I just couldn't hold my own gaze. And I also had the tendency to look at myself and immediately see the one, two, or three things about my image that I don't prefer, and
Hmm.
I would immediately see them. And so I just kept practicing. And now sometimes I go to that mirror and Lynn, I just see power in it. I mean, I look back at myself and say, me talking to me is one of the most powerful confidence booster things that I can do, and that's what I'm doing. And I do believe it accelerates change when you stand in front of that mirror. And sometimes, honestly, it accelerates my change through issues so dramatically that sometimes I even pull back and say, like, okay, I can go slow on this one. It's okay.
What
But
do you
I
mean by
think,
that? It's too powerful, and you have to
yeah,
kind of slow down the process?
I feel like my thoughts are changing faster than I'm even ready
Oh,
for them to change. So that, which is, just a little bit of a fear, but I'll notice even just a little bit of a pullback.
yeah.
But the mirror work can be used for anything, anything at all. So, for instance, I've had situations where something's come up at work and I know it requires me to use technology that I'm not very familiar with. It's a software program I use once a year to do budgeting, for instance, at work. And I'll notice that I'm feeling tense and uneasy. And I get up and I go to the mirror and I say, I can use this technology. I can figure this out.
Uh,
This is easy. This is something I could do. And I find like I literally find myself walking back to the task and saying and knocking it out. So it works for little things and it works for the big things. And the big things to me is your own view of yourself.
yeah, yeah. Do you have a small mirror at your desk at work that you can draw on the power of this without having to go to the ladies' room?
I pick up my phone and put the camera on me.
Oh,
That's my trick.
that's brilliant.
My other trick would be open up Teams and
Yeah.
and just do a test call and you're right there in front of yourself. I mean,
On the big monitor. It's
on
great.
the big monitor. Yeah.
Um, I've been doing a lot of experimenting with AI, and I suspect you have as well. I use ChatGPT as my thought buddy. I've named him
Yeah.
PD and all this. In your work, in your thinking about the critic and writing this book, what kinds of interface have you had from some of these AI tools lately?
So I'm actually not using them very much. A lot of the people who I'm working with, like the publisher end and those sorts of things, I've played with them a little. I'm a writer at heart, and I find that the writing just isn't as inspirational as I would like it to be. It's
Mhm.
functional, and it's helpful, and it's insightful, but I don't find it as inspirational.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think and that's a common thread I see of a lot of writers engaging with the technology because there's something so magical or personal about, the blank page and coming up with your own words. And the idea that I can get any help from I don't know. I haven't figured that one out.
Hmm.
Research. There's this new tool, Notebook LM from Google that I've played around with and loaded my
Hmm.
journal into it. Now I can talk to my journal and things like
Hmm.
that. So, sort of the research side of it, as opposed to the actual writing side of it. I think for writers, that's it's almost a taboo to go there.
No, and I do see great insight in that. I've used Chat PDF, which I think is similar to probably what Notebook, where you load up a document, and I've taken my own writing and loaded it up and then interacted with it, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was immensely helpful and insightful, just to like chat on my own work and pull some
Mm.
things out and see how it would answer it, and I thought that was very valuable, and I can see that being a tool that will be essential as we move
Yeah.
forward.
There's a phrase that jumped out at me probably more than halfway through the book. You talk about your current attitude as one of excited nonchalance. And I thought, I just love that. I mean, because it's sort of two different things at once. It's nonchalant, you're nonchalant, but you're excited about it. What
Yeah.
can you give a little more of a flavor of what that's like to have excited nonchalance?
Yeah. So I see that as staying in today. So unlike the critic where I was always worrying about the future. So to me, it's staying in today is that nonchalance, meaning what's here in my life is here. It's here for me. I'm not gonna sweat that, fret that, or worry about it. And but yet I'm going to bring some excitement, meaning positive expectation that the day is going to be good, that I'm going to enjoy myself, that there are going to be good things. Again, this is the exact opposite of how I lived when I had the critic. It was always like, what do I have to control for? What could go wrong and how do I prepare for it? So to me, it's letting go of all of those worries and saying, today is whatever it's going to be. So I'm going to be nonchalant about that, but I'm going to be excited and with a positive expectation.
Hmm. That's interesting. Kind of backing into the excitement through a kind of a layer of acceptance that the day is what the day is going to
Hmm.
be.
Hmm.
The part where you're inviting the reader to really identify what he or she wants. It was a bit of a problem for me because when I was honest about that, and I'm writing away on my Kindle Scribe in the notes of your manuscript, I want a white Cybertruck. And I am a big fan of Tesla. That will just
Yeah.
alienate two-thirds of my friends these days. But there's something about the beauty of it, the futuristic,
Yeah.
whatever. But it- there was a real freedom when you said it's okay to feel the want for something without doing anything toward getting it. And this would be great. My wife would be very grateful that you raised this point because uh, then she can hear why this thing symbolizes something in me. I don't know whether
Hmm.
it's boldness, the future, whatever. But I don't think I'd ever seen that before. The idea that to actually indulge in a want, or that's not the right word, but to embrace a want and investigate it and not have it be the prelude to realizing your dreams. But it seems like kind of an odd liminal space that has got some wisdom in it. How do you see that?
I see it as essential for an evolved soul that your wants are whispers of your soul.
Mm.
And I think that they hold information about you. I think they hold often healing messages about you. And so many of us repress or suppress a want because we immediately pass judgment on it or say, I could never have that. And so, what I like to teach people is don't crush your own spirit. Let the spirit come forward and say, this is what I want. But then you can investigate and say, ask yourself, why do I want this? Um, and frankly, sometimes for some material things for me, it's just because I just
Mm.
do. I think it would be a cool experience. I think it would
Mhm.
be fun to have. And that's a wonderful, wonderful way to honor yourself and to say, these feelings, these interests that I have bubbling up inside of me, they're nothing to be ashamed of. They're nothing that's leading me astray. They're parts of me coming forward. But time and again, Len, I will tell you, when I have a want like that, take your example of the Cybertruck, I would sit and list out all the why statements of why I want that. And invariably, uncover something about myself, often from childhood, that came
Mm.
forward, which are wonderful things to know about yourself. So I see, and I try to encourage people to simply allow your wants to live without stepping on them.
Mm.
And I see that as as a sign of spiritual evolution to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and you mentioned the childhood connection because I think my experience on some of this is that when I'm in the presence of a want, uh, the extent to which it excites me and creates kind of a childlike love. My wife and I have this running gag that sometimes if I get a new gadget, like when I got the Vision Pro, the headset, and it came in this big white thing, and she knew what I was going to do. I was going to take it to bed with me because when I was a kid in Pampa, Texas, and I got a Davy Crockett hat, I went to bed and slept in the Davy Crockett hat, and it was just like, and so I wonder if that's a common thread of a want investigated or not rejected. That if you, and maybe that's some of why I feel some resistance because it's not grown up. I mean, you become an adult and you put away those kinds of foolish things, but maybe they're not really that foolish at all.
I don't think they're foolish. So I would call that a limiting belief, an idea that our wants are foolish or childish. So my personal view is I would release that limiting belief and start practicing a new idea that said, no, these wants are showing me who I truly am. And I'll also just touch on, I think sometimes, as I'm a writer who writes a lot about spirituality, I think there are people who get uncomfortable between material possessions and spirituality. And my personal view is I'm an eternal being. And for a brief part of that eternity, I'm here in physical, material world. Of course, I want to experience the physical material world. And so I love it. You saying, like, you want to go to bed with that object, to me, that is really embracing who you are today and where you are today in a beautiful way. And I see that as celebrating the great big divine who sent us here. That
Yeah.
we're really embracing our time on this earth in the material world.
Huh. Yeah, that's beautiful. That makes a lot of sense. Uh, well, we've been talking about our younger selves or childhood. You've got two teenagers, I understand.
Mhm.
Uh, do you have to park all of these great ideas that you're sharing with others when you encounter your teenagers and you see them with their critics in charge? Or how does what you know affect how you parent teenagers? That may be your next book. I don't know.
Yeah, I actually I do have a book in progress for college students on some things. So like all parents of teenagers, they don't want to hear anything I have to say. But I am able in, I think, subtle ways to get some of these messages across. So when I see them, for instance, leaning into a project that brings them joy, I celebrate that, and I
Hmm.
say, I love that you're following your interest here. I think that this is great that you're listening to yourself. I mean, so I do a lot of that where I can, but we're all individuals here, and no, they're not interested in my writing. They're not interested in the things I'm doing. And I figure that that is a pretty normal thing for teenagers to want to put some distance between themselves and their parents and go figure things out on their own. And I just hope I've given them enough confidence in themselves that they'll go do that.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like a nice balance. And if I were your teenage son, I think I probably would have figured out uh, a way to hack your, your book. Says, Mom, this is what I need, and I just am so in touch with this want for having my own X account or something that you know darn well but I'm sure you can see through those kinds of strategies.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I do think our kids are mirrors for us. I mean, so one of the things that I really noticed initially with my kids when they were exploring these different new interests and curiosities, they very naturally would move through them and then move on to something
Mm,
that was more interesting to them. And I found that I was the one because I came from a generation where you finish what you start. You don't, once you invest, let's say, in a hobby, you don't just abandon the hobby. And I had to really reform those ideas and really see that because we are living in this fast-moving world, their ability to detach from something without criticizing themselves at all about that detachment is a wonderful attribute to have, and they move through things quickly. So I learned from them.
yeah, there's a fluidity to it that we can certainly learn from. Hmm.
Mhm.
Um, Well, I wanted to go straight to the heart of the book and how it touched me and everything, but I want to make sure that my listeners have a sense of the book. So maybe just, what you hope a reader would get out of it, what's the shape of anything. If you picture an elevator in a really high building, how would you end talking about the book that's going to be published in a week? Let's see, 12 days from now, I think.
Yes, yeah, on the 14th. Yes. Thanks, Len. So well, Lose Your Critic for Good is truly a manual for how to do this work, for how to take yourself from a person who either self-criticizes, plays small, or diminishes themselves in any way at all, and to move you through a series of exercises that will help you break free of those patterns. And so the book is divided into 28 chapters, and every chapter has not only my encouragement and my advice and wisdom, but it has a specific exercise for you to try. And each one of these exercises, I believe, helps you break up from that critic mentality. It's almost like you've got this attachment to this pattern of thought, and you start getting some distance from that attachment to that pattern of thought, and then building up some new positive habits. and then you're off to the races. I really see this as like you almost hit a tipping point from the negative to the positive, and you find yourself increasingly positive each day, increasingly more confident, more clear around your life goals and what you want to accomplish. And frankly, I became even more driven for my goals.
There's a nice aspect of it at the end of each chapter. It's almost like a little case study. You tell somebody's story. How did you see those parts of the book advancing the project?
So the project, because I am such a practical writer, is just the book is just chock full of directive practical exercises. I wanted to add just a little element of story to the book.
Hmm.
So the vignettes that I have there are made up stories, but they're intended to give you a little bit of a glimpse of someone's life. With the critic. And so, because of course it's easier for us to see the critic in others than we can
Hmm.
often see it in ourselves. And it's often easier for us to see someone else's limiting belief or way that they're holding themselves small or playing it safe. And so seeing those stories, I was hopeful would cause other people to see themselves.
That makes sense. It really it is so true because, oh, well, yeah, she should be doing this. It's obvious. And they, oh, what about me? Maybe I should too. Clever, clever.
Yeah. Yes.
Uh, Well, I have been speaking with Sue Erhart, author of Lose Your Critic for Good, a step-by-step process for reclaiming your spirit. It's going to be released on January 14th, and this has been a real treat, Sue. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Len. I appreciate it.
All right. And as your note says, I'm sure we have perfect audio here. I'll stop the recording, stop the cloud.